Welcome to my channel. What if the most impossible sniper shot in history wasn't taken by you? 15-year veteran sharpshooter Cass Donovan watches a hostage-taker drop dead, yet she never fired. The shot defied physics, threading a moving target through concrete at over 2 kilometers. They call me a sharpshooter. Some even throw around legend, like it means anything when you're staring down the scope at a child about to die. My name's Cass Donovan, and I've spent 15 years behind a rifle, military first, then with the Bureau's Special Response Unit. If there's one thing that career taught me, it's this: the worst shots aren't the ones you miss. They're the ones you can't take. That afternoon, the wind in Iron Vale was screaming through the hollow like it wanted to rip the skin off your bones. I had my cheek pressed to the stock, eye to the glass, looking straight at a nightmare. A man, thick-necked, bearded, eyes wild, had the muzzle of an AK jammed against a little girl's temple. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her small hands trembling against the slab of broken concrete she was using for cover. Beside her, a woman, her mother, I assumed, lay motionless, a dark pool of blood blooming beneath her head. I whispered into my mic, "Command, Overwatch. I've got 30 seconds before this guy pulls it." My voice came out steadier than I felt. The shooter was Anton Resnick, former Spetsnaz turned hired gun. Intel said he'd been ranting for hours about betrayal and vengeance. He had that look I've seen before, the one that means there's no negotiating your way to a happy ending. Beside me, my spotter, Maya Torres, crouched over her rangefinder and ballistic tablet, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Cass," she murmured. "We're at 147 meters, gusting 20 knots crosswind, shifting every 30 seconds. Even in perfect weather, this would be threading a needle blindfolded. With this wind, 1 degree off, and we kill the girl." Resnick's position didn't help. He was tucked behind the concrete lip of a loading dock inside an abandoned steel mill, showing only a sliver of head and shoulder when he screamed his demands. "No clean lane. No chance." Command came back on comms. "Overwatch, negotiator says the subject's getting twitchy. You've got 2 minutes before he makes good on his threat." 2 minutes. The pressure settled on my chest like a slab of granite. I'd been here before, where skill wasn't enough and luck felt like a cruel joke. Through the scope, I caught a tiny movement, Resnick's trigger finger flexing, a tell I'd seen on too many bodies just before they fell. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. No break coming in the wind. Storms rolling in. Physics says this isn't happening. Physics didn't care that a child's lips were moving in silent prayer. Didn't care that her father, hogtied nearby, was straining against his restraints so hard the skin had split on his wrists. And I didn't care that my career might end if I pulled an impossible shot. I cared about that girl. But the truth? Even my hands, steady as they'd been for years, couldn't make the bullet bend around the laws of nature. I lowered my finger from the trigger. And then, the impossible happened. I'd barely pulled my finger clear when the girl's head snapped toward me. Through the glass, it was like her eyes found mine, steady, unblinking. Not pleading, not panicked, trusting. And then Resnick's skull bloomed crimson. No warning, no muzzle flash, no crack of a rifle. 1 second, he was tightening on the trigger. The next, he was a puppet with his strings cut, tumbling sideways in a heap. His rifle clattered to the concrete. The girl bolted, her sobs slicing through the hollow like a flare in the dark. What the hell just happened? Maya's voice jumped an octave, her hands already spinning the spotting scope toward every possible Overwatch point. I was on him the whole time. I didn't see a thing. Flash, movement, anything. I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. "Nothing," she said. "It's like the damn bullet appeared midair." Resnick was down, motionless in his own blood. It was a perfect shot, dead center, surgically placed between hostage and cover. The kind of hit that made careers. But it hadn't been mine. In my ear, command exploded into static and chaos. SWAT flooding the building. Medics racing for the hostages. Somebody demanding to know who had fired. I swallowed the truth and forced my voice steady. "Command, Overwatch. Target neutralized. Hostages appear safe." But I hesitated, feeling the words leave my mouth like stones dropping into deep water. "We did not fire." The channel went dead for a beat, then came back, urgent. "Overwatch, confirm. Did you say you did not engage?" Affirmative. Shot came from unknown location. We're working to determine source. I swung my scope northeast. Across the hollow, skeletal frames of abandoned buildings loomed against the slate-gray sky. And there, jutting above the wreckage, an old construction crane, yellow paint flaking to rust. It was just far enough, just high enough, to prick the back of my neck. Maya, run the angles, I said. She was already on it. Her fingers flew over the calculator, punching in wind, distance, elevation. When she looked up, her face had gone pale. If that shot came from the crane, Cass, it's 2,300 meters. Crosswind shifting every 30 seconds. And it would have had to pass through a 4-inch gap in concrete, exactly as he moved into it. What's the probability? I asked. She just stared at me for a moment, then said it flat. 0. Even if you were a god behind a rifle, you'd have to know the future to make that shot. I kept my scope locked on the crane's empty cab, every nerve tuned to the stillness. Something about it whispered back. SWAT was sweeping Resnick's kill zone below, boots pounding concrete, radios barking clipped updates. I stayed prone, scope fixed on that crane. My gut wouldn't let me look away. 20 minutes passed. Nothing moved. No shadow. No glint. Just rusted lattice against the heavy gray sky. Finally, I broke the trance. We're checking it, I told Maya, already stripping down my rifle and slinging it across my back. She didn't argue. Never a good sign. The walkover was slow, every crunch of broken glass underfoot echoing too loud. The storm had fully arrived now, wind whipping between the hollow's derelict buildings like a living thing. From up close, the crane looked worse. Paint scabbed away to bare metal, cab windows clouded with grime. This thing's been dead for years, Maya muttered, scanning the perimeter with her monocular. No way anyone hauled a precision rig up here without leaving tracks. I stepped into the base and tilted my head back. The ladder was a narrow spine of steel leading to the cab nearly 20 stories up. You don't have to come, I said. She gave me a look. Try and stop me. We climbed. Wind clawed at us, rattling the steel beneath our boots. Halfway up, I felt the oddest thing, a prickling between my shoulder blades. The unmistakable sense of being watched. When we finally hauled ourselves into the cab, it was empty. Not just empty, stripped. No rifle case. No shell casings. Not even a boot scuff on the dusty floor. Cass, Maya called softly. Tucked between two warped metal panels, almost invisible, was a folded scrap of paper. I pulled it free, fingers cold against the soft, worn edges. In neat, tight handwriting, 41. 2694 N, 110. 8572 W, coordinates. Maya was already pulling them up on her phone. That's, she frowned, 30 miles west. An abandoned warehouse outside Jackson Ridge. 2 hours later, SWAT had the place surrounded. I was with the first team through the door. The air inside was stale, thick with dust. And there, in the center of the cracked concrete floor, sat a single spent casing. .338 Lapua Magnum. Same caliber as Resnick's death. Still warm to the touch. Beside it, etched into the concrete like it had been burned there, were words that stopped me cold. Some shots transcend distance. Some, justice transcends time. The lab techs moved in around the casing like it was a holy relic. I crouched nearby, gloved fingers brushing the laser-scorched inscription again, as if touching it might make the words explain themselves. Some shots transcend distance. Some, justice transcends time. Whoever left it hadn't just wanted me to find it. They wanted me to remember it. The forensics team bagged the Lapua shell, muttering under their breath. One of them, a wiry guy named Danton who'd seen his share of bizarre crime scenes, gave me a side eye. This was fired, what, hours ago? But it's still warm. How the hell? Don't know, I cut in. And I didn't want to speculate until I had more than guesses. 2 days later, I was back at HQ, staring at the ballistics report from Dr. Lena Brooks, our lead specialist. She'd been doing this longer than I'd been behind a rifle. The woman's hands usually never shook. But in the crime scene photos, her tweezers trembled over that bullet. Recovered round. No deformation. No drift. No tumble. Maintained velocity across calculated 3 kilometers trajectory. Passed between 2 concrete barriers, approximate gap, for inches, without deviation. No deviation. At that range, with that wind? That was a fairy tale. I scrolled to the next page, and froze. Impact timing. Projectile fired approximate 3. 1 second before target entered line of sight. That wasn't marksmanship. That was prophecy. The report's final note was worse. Trajectory physically impossible based on known firing positions. Barriers create complete ballistic shadow. No clear path. So either every piece of physics I'd learned was wrong, or someone out there had a way of bending reality to line up a kill shot. Maya dropped a thumb drive on my desk. Traffic cam from the ridge across the hollow. Caught the crane. I opened the file. Grainy footage. The crane's cab sat empty. Then, one frame, something rippled inside it, like heat off asphalt. 3 seconds later, Resnick's head burst like an overripe melon in the background. No muzzle flash. No visible shooter. Just that shimmer. That's all it gives us, Maya said. 1/30th of a second. Then gone. The room felt smaller. Colder. Because whoever had done this hadn't just outshot me. They'd rewritten the rules I'd built my life on. The warehouse coordinates wouldn't leave me alone. 30 miles from the crane, no elevation, no logical vantage point on Resnick's kill zone. Yet the 338 casing was still warm when we found it. 3 days after the shooting, I drove back out there alone. The weather had turned bitter, the kind of cold that chews into your joints. The warehouse crouched against the horizon like an old, sullen dog. Windows boarded, corrugated siding pitted with rust. Inside, my boots crunched through years of dust. The scorch-etched inscription was still there, untouched. Some shots transcend distance. Some, justice transcends time. I crouched beside it again, pressing my palm flat against the concrete. The stillness pressed back. I should have left. Instead, I paced the floor, replaying angles in my head. From here, Resnick Steel Mill was just a speck beyond the farmland and tree lanes. No sightlines. No clear shot. Not even with a spotter and a miracle. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line of text. Rooftop. Midnight. Bring the casing. Come alone. I stood there staring at it until my breath fogged the screen. Every instinct screamed to call backup. Every protocol said to loop in command. But protocol hadn't taken the shot that saved the girl's life. Back at my apartment, the casing sat in its evidence pouch on my desk. I'd never logged it officially. Part of me had been protecting the chain of evidence. The bigger part, I think, had been protecting myself from what it meant if I was holding proof of the impossible. At 11:50 p.m., I holstered my sidearm, slipped the pouch into my pocket, and climbed the stairwell to my building's roof. The wind off the Iron Vale skyline cut like broken glass. She was already there, standing at the ledge, a dark silhouette against the burn of city lights. She didn't turn when I stepped out. Her posture was controlled power, like a predator waiting, not hiding. When she finally spoke, her voice carried on the wind with an accent I couldn't pin down. "You've been asking questions, Agent Donovan." She turned slowly. Streetlight glow caught her face, striking, angular, too young for the weight in her eyes. And those eyes, cold calculation threaded with something older than anything I'd ever seen in a human being. "Who are you?" I asked, my hand resting on the grip of my Glock. "And how did you take that shot?" Her gaze didn't flinch. "The shot seemed impossible because you were thinking like a sniper." She stepped closer. "You were thinking in lines. In limits. Cause and effect." "That's not thinking," I said. "That's physics. Bullets don't curve around concrete." Her smile was small, unsettling. "They don't. If you believe reality is as flat as they teach you." "You saying you bent the bullet?" I kept my tone flat, but my pulse was picking up. "No," she said softly. "I bent the space it traveled through." She reached under her coat and pulled out a rifle, or at least, something shaped like one. But it wasn't steel and polymer. The barrel shimmered faintly, like heat ripples off asphalt. The scope wasn't glass. It swirled with galaxies that shifted when she moved. Symbols I couldn't read were etched into the frame, pulsing faintly as if alive. "This," she said, almost reverently, "is what it looks like when human invention meets technology your kind won't discover for 100 years. When someone stops accepting that the limits you believe in are the limits that matter." I tightened my grip on the Glock. "What are you? Government? Private contractor? Some lunatic with too much money?" Her head tilted slightly, amused. "I'm what happens when someone decides justice shouldn't wait for permission." She brushed the rifle's barrel with her fingertips. "That girl lived because someone had to die, and I had the means to make sure it happened." "Why reveal yourself to me?" I asked. Because some shots need to be witnessed. Some truths need to survive, even if no one will believe them. She stepped backward toward the ledge, the wind pulling her coat like a sail. And because, Agent Donovan, one day you'll face another moment that feels impossible. And when that moment comes, you'll remember, impossible just means it hasn't been done yet. Then she stepped off the edge. I rushed forward, but there was nothing. No scream, no body, just empty air and the city lights below, and the cold weight of the 338 casing in my pocket. By the time I got back downstairs, my hands were still trembling, not from the cold. I kept replaying her last look in my head, the calm certainty in her voice. And that rifle, every sniper I've ever known treats their weapon like a limb. But she'd held hers like it was alive. I filed no report. How could I? Unknown female leapt off a 20-story building and vanished. Isn't exactly something you can slip into a supplemental without internal affairs calling for a psych eval. Instead, I typed the bare minimum into my incident log. Follow-up to Resnick case yielded no actionable intelligence. By the next morning, Resnick's file had been scrubbed. Not redacted, scrubbed. Entire entries gone. Witness statements missing. Even the traffic cam footage with the shimmer was replaced with a generic data corruption placeholder. I went to Maya's desk. Tell me you backed up the footage. She just looked at me, pale. It was gone when I got in. Even from my personal drive. We both knew what that meant. This wasn't a glitch. Someone with clearance had erased it, and fast. Over the next week, I kept catching shadows in my periphery, parked vans with dark glass lingering near my block, unfamiliar faces at the coffee shop across from HQ. Every time I turned to get a better look, they were gone. Not amateurs. Professionals. At night, sleep came in fits. I'd dream of bullets twisting through the air like serpents, weaving between slabs of concrete, sliding through geometry that shouldn't exist. And in every dream, I'd hear her voice again. Impossible just means it hasn't been done yet. I started carrying the 338 casing everywhere. Not out of sentiment, out of suspicion. It was proof, tangible, undeniable, that something real had happened. Something that bent the rules. And then, one morning, a package appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It was me, lying prone in my Overwatch position during the Resnick standoff, taken from an angle no one should have been able to get without standing 3 feet behind me. Across the bottom, in the same neat handwriting from the crane's note, "You're in the scope now." I stared at the photograph until the edges bent under my grip. Whoever took it hadn't just been close, they'd been right there. I thought about the climb up to that Overwatch spot. Narrow, exposed. No way someone could tail me without my spotting them. Unless they'd been there before I arrived. Waiting. I called Maya. Meet me at the diner on 7th. Bring nothing bureau issued. She slid into the booth 15 minutes later, civilian clothes, hair tucked under a ball cap. I put the photo between us. She studied it, jaw tightening. That angle, you'd have heard them breathe. Exactly, I said. Which means either they ghosted in, or I let the unspoken option hang there. Or they weren't there in our time, she finished. You're thinking what I'm thinking? I didn't answer. Not yet. For the next 2 days, I ran my own counter-surveillance. Parked in alleys, doubled back on foot, swapped cabs 3 times between destinations. And still, I caught flashes. A dark coat crossing a street I'd just left. A reflection in a shop window that didn't match anyone behind me. Whoever they weren't following to intimidate. They were tracking. On the 3rd night, I took the bait. Walked straight into a blind alley behind an abandoned print shop. No exits, no cameras I could see. I stopped halfway down, hand on my Glock, and waited. The figure stepped from the shadows, tall, built like corded steel, hood up, face hidden. They didn't speak, just reached into their coat and tossed something underhand. It landed at my feet with a metallic clink. The 338 casing. The same one I'd been keeping in my pocket for weeks. I knelt, picked it up. Identical down to the tiny scuff marks. Which meant one of 2 things. They'd lifted it off me without my noticing, or, "This isn't mine," I said. The hood tilted. Then, a low voice. "It will be." Before I could move, they turned the corner and were gone. I ran after them. Empty street, just the wind off the river. I looked down at the casing in my palm. Warm. I sat in my apartment that night with both casings laid out on the table. Same caliber. Same weight. Same scuff on the brass lip, down to the micron. I'd run my fingers over the marks enough times to know this wasn't duplication by hand. This was duplication by reality. It was the same casing. Twice. Maya came over after midnight. She barely glanced at the whiskey bottle on the counter before zeroing in on the table. What am I looking at? The one on the left is the Resnick casing, I said. The one on the right showed up tonight. Both warm when I got them. She crouched down, eyeing them like evidence in a bomb case. Cass, that's impossible. Yeah, I said. So was the Resnick shot. I told her about the alley, the hooded figure, the words they left me with. She didn't blink. So now we've got two of them. Or one. I countered. One person who can be in more than one place, more than one time, at once. The room went quiet. Only the ticking of my old wall clock cut through it. Maya finally straightened. If they can do that, what do they want with you? That's the part one can't see. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Either I'm a threat, or I'm a recruit. She didn't touch her glass. If you were a threat, you'd already be dead. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. The next morning, I found an envelope wedged under my door. Inside was a map of Ironvale, printed from a satellite overlay. 3 locations were circled in red ink: my apartment building, the Crane site, and Dead Center, an old clock tower on River Street. Across the bottom, in that same neat handwriting, midnight. Bring both. I didn't bother asking Maya if she'd come. She just said, I'll drive. As we pulled up to the tower that night, the city was awash of sodium orange glow. The tower's shadow fell across us like the gnomon of some giant, broken sundial. And at its base, standing perfectly still, was her. She stood with her hands in the pockets of her coat, the tower's clock face looming above her like a pale, blind eye. The river wind tugged at her hair. No backup. No spotter. Just her. Maya parked across the street, stayed in the car, engine running. I walked the rest of the way, both casings in my pocket like weights pulling me forward. You came, she said. Not a question. You keep summoning me like some ghost story, I said. Maybe I just wanted to see if you're real. Her gaze flicked to my pocket. Do you have them? I pulled both casings out, let the streetlight glint off them. Tell me why I keep getting souvenirs. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint shimmer in her eyes, same shimmer I'd seen in that impossible Crane footage. Markers, she said. For moments that matter. Every shot I take that bends the rules leaves one behind. Bends the rules, I repeated. That's your word for this? You're rewriting physics. Her half-smile didn't reach her eyes. Physics is just the name your time gives to the cage you're in. I moved between the bars. And me? I asked. What am I in your little game? Test subject? Audience? She studied me like she was sighting through a scope. Witness. Candidate. That last word hit harder than I wanted it to. Candidate for what? To do what I do, she said simply. To take the shots no one else can. To be where you need to be before you know you'll need to be there. I laughed once sharp. You think I'm going to believe you can teach me to do that? I don't think, she said, leaning in so close I could smell the faint tang of ozone on her coat. I know. You've already done it. Just not yet. That stopped me cold. She pressed one casing into my palm. When the time comes, this will be warm again. That's when you'll know. Before I could answer, she turned and walked toward the river. And with each step, her outline wavered, blurred, until the night air swallowed her whole. I stood under the broken clock until its hands pointed to 1 minute past midnight, the city noise washing back in like a tide. Maya finally got out of the car, looking for her. She's gone, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. The casing in my hand was warm. And for the first time since Resnick hit the ground, I knew this wasn't over.